the average American saving rate is 4%, and that savings rate of 4% is including of retirement plans that are being saved into. Okay. The average client that we have on Currents, their savings rate is 28%.
That's insane.
And the reason is because of what I just talked about, which is the unconscious consumption and manually saving, to where we flip that flow to where they are unconsciously saving and manually spending.
You know who made it.
Welcome back to the Wealth Eazy Show, where we talk all things wealth, health, and real estate. Today, I've got a very special guest. My guest today holds a degree in Master's of Science in Finance from Vanderbilt University, where he honed his analytical skills and gained a deep understanding of financial economics. At the young age of 27, he's already been in the financial services industry for a decade and is the son of my mentor, Trent Fortner. Please welcome to the show, Brock Fortner. Welcome, Brock.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. That was a good. That was a pretty good intro. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you've had many intros. I mean, you've been speaking. I've seen you on many stages. You've done a lot of speaking gigs, and you've got your own podcast, and you've been on other podcasts. So I'm sure you've had much better introductions.
That was one of the best. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. How's it going down there? You're in Nashville.
I am in Nashville. Things are extremely well. It's getting warmer and sunnier, and golf is getting closer. So I'm happy.
You haven't been on the golf course yet?
Oh, I've been on the golf course,
Okay.
but the golf course just keeps getting better each time I play.
Yeah, because you could pretty much play all year round there, yeah?
Yep. Well, we can play all year round. My rule is if it's going to get over 50 degrees, I'll go play. But once it drops below 30, they'll tarp the greens, and I don't want to play when it's that cold anyways.
Yeah, you know what? I've got a rule. I am a bit of a princess, so it's got to be 2 digits, and we're talking Celsius. So it's got to be 10 degrees Celsius, which would be 50, for me to get my butt out there on the golf course. Otherwise, it's just not fun.
I agree 100%. That's my rule too.
Yeah. Only cigars, they don't keep you warm. The brandy does, but it's just not fun.
Yeah.
And then
our club has some protective gear on our carts, so that does help a tiny little bit, but still not worth it, I don't think.
Yeah. Amazing. Your dad has been my mentor for the last 10 years. And I remember you when you were just starting getting into the business. You were like just getting out of high school. And you have just excelled. Like, you've exploded in the industry, and and honestly, from someone, I've been in the business 26 years. I'm a bit older than you. I'm gonna be 54, but from someone looking down and seeing when you first started, honestly, I'm really proud of you and seeing where you have come. Because honestly, I'll be honest, I listen to your podcast, and even though I've been in the business 26 years, I still learn stuff from you, Nate, and Dean. And I love listening to your shows because I pick up little nuggets, even though I've been in the business for 26 years now. My question to you is, your dad's been in the business for over 35 years, and you represent a newer generation of advisors. So what's one of the fundamental financial principles that you and your dad both completely agree on? And then one where your perspectives are notably different?
That's a pretty good question to start off on. Probably the one that we agree on the most is that the implementation of whole life insurance in somebody's financial life will only make it better by turbocharging all other assets, and it does not cost you an income during retirement or legacy. I think that's the one thing that we agree on the most. If there was one thing that we disagree on or don't see eye to eye on, I don't know if there's anything anything yet, because what's funny is, so he's like my OG mentor. Most of what I learned is from him.
Your dad's the GOAT. He's amazing.
Yeah, he is. But I'm gonna say the problem, but it's not a problem, is that my mentors who are mentoring me now at a new level were all coached by him. So it's kind of like, well, I'm just getting regurgitated info. And it's kind of funny because I'll go spend a weekend with like Garrett Gunderson, who wrote What Would the Rockefellers Do? And I'll come home and I'll share with my dad, all that we learned, all that we were talking about. And he was like, and I'm so glad that you got it this time. And then I reflect, and I'm like, oh yeah, you told me that. That makes sense.
And you know what? I've got questions written down, and we're going to get into some of those mentors and Garrett and Luke Donald. But one of the things is you got excited about the financial industry at such a young age. I'm trying to get my son to read my book, Wealth Without Wall Street, and he looks at it. And I'll come back and say, can you tell me something that you learned? He says, Dad, I really don't understand this. I'm like, well, I want you to highlight everything that you don't understand. He goes, Dad, I'd be highlighting the whole book. But then when we're sitting and having, say, breakfast together or we're having lunch together, he'll start asking me questions, and he learns much more by just asking me questions. So it gave me an idea that I said, if I were to rewrite the book for you to understand, tell me how I could dumb it down and maybe write a kid's book based off my book. And he said, Dad, I think we like storytelling. So if you can write it, more of a story. And then right away it came to me something like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where Robert Kiyosaki talked about, he had his professor father, then, the educated one, then he had the business one, and it's a story. So, my son's kind of, getting excited in a little bit. He's only 13. But what got you excited into the business to, like, at a high school and a college, like, just dive right into what we're doing right now?
It's a good question. It would be wrong of me if I said that I just wasn't gifted in this. Like, there are some people who pick up on things better than others. Like, I have friends that are in the medical world that it just clicks for them.
Yeah.
Well, I went in biology class and I made A's in every class except for biology or science. Like, I just couldn't get it. But when it comes to finances and really complex, complicated cases, things just come extremely easy to me. So uh, I should address that part. But people ask me this about how did you get into it? Like, was this a family business? And going into this industry, I didn't actually know what my dad did until I started asking questions. I just knew that he traveled all the time. We got presents when he would come home, and he was at every event I ever had,
Mhm.
but not just mine, like mine, my brothers. There's one summer where I was playing baseball, my younger brother was playing baseball, and across the two of us, there's like 182 games, and he missed one.
Wow.
And so, like, we knew what was going on, we just didn't know what it was. And then when I graduated high school, I had a baseball injury, and I was having to figure out life. I was answering all those questions that when you go off to university or college, that people are like, what do I do with my life? Where do I go? What do I study? Where do I get my degree in? And that's when I started asking questions. And about that time, the fall of my freshman year, um, my dad was having a workshop for advisors here in Nashville, and he said, "Why don't you just come and watch what we do?" And I remember, it was here in Nashville, it was down in the Gulch, it was at one of these hotels, and I just remember like the whole day, just listening and just taking notes. No license, no nothing. I just had this little paper notebook, and I was just taking notes as fast as I could. And I knew from then on, it was like, this is what I want. Like, this gives me energy, it doesn't drain it. Like, I actually enjoy learning from this, and
Mhm.
I'm going to continue to do it.
One thing I do know about your father, he is a family man. Like, your brother Jack plays college ball, and one
Yeah,
hell of a pitcher.
yeah, he is.
And your dad, he doesn't miss a game. He
Oh no.
posts, he's on it, he's posting. And I remember, we've got some, group calls, and he's like, guys, there's no calls this week because I got my son's game. Like,
That's right.
he's a really dedicated father, and I really admire him for that. Not to mention, I mean, the man changed my life and the way I look at things. I was in the financial services business since 1999. And in 2016 is when I sold my book of business. I was a Bay Street advisor. You got the Wall Street advisor. I was a Bay Street advisor. And I was that traditional guy. And he just had me look at the business in a whole new light. And what your dad is really great at is asking the right questions and fact finding. He's so good at that. Um,
He is.
how have client expectations changed from his generation advisors to yours, particularly regarding transparency and education? Because I'm thinking you might have a different maybe age group or type of client than what your dad might have.
hmm Yeah, I would agree. My clients are between the ages of 25 and 45. I think what has been changing or what's different is my conversations aren't so much around, hey, how do we save up enough for retirement all
Mhm.
the time? My conversations are more revolved around, hey, how do we create enough income outside of your job so that one day you're not transitioning to retirement, you're transitioning just into managing your cash flow,
Mhm.
and how you have these assets that produce the life that you want. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. And um, you know, the question, the clients that my dad gets to consult on throughout, in his years of practice, and then how he helps advisors now, a lot of them talk about, hey, I want to save up enough for retirement, and that's incredible. But when they come into my practice and they start talking about that to me, I have to remind myself, like, hey, there are still some people today that believe that they just need a big nest egg, and my job is to help them spend it the most efficient way possible,
Mhm.
not necessarily, hey, how do we go buy assets that produce income?
Right. Financial advisories often become such a family business, and you mentioned this. That, your dad being so well known in the industry. People might think that you come from a family. It's a family business, but truly, it's not because your other two brothers aren't really involved. I think your other brother might be getting involved.
Maybe. So my older brother,
Yeah.
he's in school for psychology
Yeah.
and studying that. He wants to be a professor. My younger brother, we don't really know right now what he knows, what he thinks about is how he can throw a baseball. And
Okay.
that's what's all on his mind. So maybe he
Yeah.
enjoys coming to the classes.
So, how has working in the same industry as your dad shaped your relationship with your father?
Oh, that's fun. Number one, it's a lot of fun because I get to um, a lot of times you hear stories from your parents about, what life was like, what they went through when they were growing up, and all these things. Well, I get to go to these things and I get to talk to the other people within those stories
Mhm.
and hear how things were, and who the stories were about and everything. So I think that's really cool. The those people who are in those stories, they mentor me, they take me under their wing, they help me a ton, which is incredible. But it's fun because not only do I get to go to my dad with life just troubles and needing advice, but like with work, we get to talk about more than just life in general, but we get to talk about work, and we both have a passion in it, and we have a lot of fun with it. And we go on trips together all the
Mhm.
time with conferences, and or if I qualify for a trip, I'll usually take him, and we get to
Amazing.
play a lot of golf together, and
Yeah.
so it's always fun.
Hey everyone, it's John. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask that you please subscribe to the show by just clicking the subscribe button right here. I'd really appreciate it. It helps grow the show so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. If you're already subscribed, a huge thank you. When you subscribe, you're going to get access to the program before anybody else does. So if you would, just click subscribe right here. Thanks so much, and welcome back to the Wealth Easy Show. That's awesome. Having watched your father's career unfold, and now you're building your own, what lesson from him took you years to fully appreciate?
I am still learning those,
Yeah.
and it's always fun because now I'm kind of past that uh, more of the immature phase in the business where I think I know everything and I don't really need as much help, and I ask the shallow questions of help.
Mhm.
Now it is more of, what were the lessons that you learned? What do I need to understand? Where am I going in this? And I remember we had a car ride to Atlanta last year where we were both speaking at an event. And we just talked about, all the lessons that he learned growing up in the business and having major success in investments, and what are the things that I need to understand and know. And one of the best lessons I think I've ever learned, which you've kind of spoken about here, is how you view your calendar and how you put your personal life on there first. And I can't appreciate that enough nowadays because all of my friends, they can't take off of work. They have to put work on their calendar first and then their personal life. And for me, I'm at all of my friends' events. I'm at events every single month, almost every other week, and I enjoy it. And it still gives me energy to come back to work and be there and have a great life and a great job life. And
Mhm.
so I think that's probably the one I appreciate the most is just understand your calendar and how that is your most important asset.
Well, you couldn't have said it at a better time because I give credit to your dad for me finishing my book because I started my book in 2020, just prior to COVID, and I got to writing about 13,000 words, and then COVID hit, and I got like ridiculously busy because I'm also in the mortgage business and I'm a real estate broker, and if you know what the interest rates did, they went extremely low. People started buying houses. It was just insane. You couldn't list a house and not get 10 multiple offers on it. So I was busy selling real estate and I was busy with the mortgage and I kind of forgot about the book. And then I was on a one-on-one coaching call with your dad and he says, "Hey, how's your book coming along?" And I said, "Trent, I haven't written a word in like over 2 years." I said, I don't even have the time. Like, how do guys like, Ed Milet and Garrett, how do they find the time to write these books? Because they're busier than me. You know, the first thing your dad said, "Is it in your calendar? If it's not in your calendar, you're not going to do it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, it's not." And that really resonated with me. And literally I hung up the phone with that call and I looked in and I said, "Okay, when's the best time for me to write?" And it can't be in the afternoon because we just get so busy and then everything just pops up emails. So I'd like, from 5 a.m. till 7 a.m. is when I'm going to write. So I started waking up at 4:30 in the morning. Instead of getting up at 6, I got up at 4:30. And then by 5 o'clock, my alarm went off. Whatever I was doing, I dropped it. If I was doing emails, whatever. From 5 to 7, I wrote. And then in 9 months, I went from 13,000 words to 87,000 words and I completed my book. And in the back of my book, in the acknowledgments, I mentioned your dad, him being my mentor, but also being responsible for getting me back on track to finishing it. And all it was is put in your calendar. If it's not there, it's not going to get done.
That's right.
So it's nice that, you're doing things, I think at such a young age, you've got this incredible career that you've developed over the last decade. You're still developing your craft, but you've also got time to play golf, travel. I think, honestly, I'm envious of you that you get to do these things like travel on a road trip with your dad and go to speaking events and talk and share ideas. I think that's absolutely, it's just amazing. And I'm envious of that, of you being able to do that. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
I had your dad on my show, my second episode, and he discussed navigating financial misinformation. What do you think is the biggest piece of financial misinformation that you see out there right now in regards to building wealth?
I think a lot of it has to do around passive income. So TikTok is probably Instagram, social media is probably the worst thing in the world, but also the best thing in the world. There's more information that people can get today than ever before. But the problem is there's so much information that a lot of it's just piecemeal and you don't know how it works, or you don't know where it's going on. And I'll have people come to me. I remember there was, I'm hanging out at church and this guy comes up to me. He goes, "Man, can I talk to you about private placement life insurance?" And I looked at him. I'm like, "Do you have $5 million to take off the table today?" He's like, "No." I said, "Okay, then we don't need to talk about it." Because, there's a lot of people who will put things on social media and make it sound like the coolest thing in the world, but what they'll leave off is the qualifications for it, what it costs, what it does, where it's at, how are you going to implement it? And one of those things a lot of times is also like passive income. Everybody's wants to have uh, what do they call it? Like a side gig or a side hustle.
Side
People want
hustle,
to have a
yeah.
side hustle, or, oh, I'm going to buy all this real estate, and, oh, I'm going to flip houses for all this income. And being in the world that I live in and the experiences that I have, like, I know passive income is a lie. There's no such thing as passive income. You've got to actually put in the work and have a hand in that, or, you're going to fall apart because, where you grow your money, but you don't grow yourself, That's where risk is created. And there's got to be a conversation with people to realize passive income can come later. You've got to first grow your active income and get that large, because if you don't have any money to put into these vehicles and the knowledge, expertise, experience to grow these things, you're going to lose one day and you're going to hate it. You're going to turn everything off, and you're going to crumble because you just grew your money without growing yourself. And I think that's one of the most misunderstood things, and things I wish would go away.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you hear out there people saying, yeah, I've got this side hustle. I got that. I got that. I got that. I'm like, well, why? First of all, why do you have so many? Number one. Two, I mean, I've got my main business, which was in my financial services, my wealth management practice. But then I have mortgages and real estate. But my side hustles are all symbiotic, right? I feed off of I can get a mortgage client, and I could take a look at all their assets and find out they got a ton of assets. I'm like, but no life insurance. They've got nothing to cover their mortgage if something were to happen to them. And you hear too many of these people say, well, the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. That is true. However, they didn't get that in their young years. They focused on their first main stream of income, and then they created passive, like you said, passive streams of income later on. But you can't focus on having 7 streams of income and then forget about the main first stream, because you're just going to lose.
That's right.
And I think what you made a really good point about TikTok and Instagram. We're both on it. I'm really big on the TikTok and Instagram, but I see a lot of bad information, and I get a lot of people making comments that they don't agree with me. I'm like, that's okay. Like you just weren't educated enough to understand how things work. But I think this whole thing about the businessman, that this whole 7 streams of income, yes, build passive streams of income where you're not focusing all your time on it. What do you think is the big difference between being wealthy and having financial freedom?
So I think one thing we need to have some clarification on is financial freedom is not a number in the bank. I think financial independence is when your assets produce more than what your lifestyle expenses
Agreed.
are.
Yep.
Financial freedom is the recognition within your mental state that money is no longer your main excuse or decision maker. There's a difference also between being rich and being wealthy. I know a lot of rich people, but they're not wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
because to me, being wealthy is your ability to be present. And
Yep.
if you can't be present because you've got all these assets, you're rich, you got these cars, the houses, you got all this stuff, but you can't be present enough to step away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and not have to worry about what's going on. I don't think you're wealthy, to me.
Yep. I agree. And I think financial freedom is being able to do things on your terms. And
Yep.
like you said, having the financial independence that you can do things on your terms, like your dad's doing. He's attending all these games because there's going to come a point where maybe Jack's not going to play baseball anymore. He's going to do something else. You don't want to miss all those times at your son's games.
Yep.
And so creating these memories, I think, is the ideal. You said, of being wealthy, that you're able to do that. Let's talk about our friend Dave Ramsey, because Dave gives a lot of good advice on getting out of debt. He's great at discipline, living in a scarcity mindset, getting out of debt. But when it comes to life insurance, I think you and I share the same philosophy that he gets it all wrong. And, he promotes buying term insurance, investing the difference on his show. And he says, whole life insurance is too expensive, and that we as advisors, we only sell it because we get paid a large commission. What's your response to his statement? And why you think buying term and investing the difference doesn't work?
I think it does work. I think by term
If you're
and save the
disciplined
difference.
enough, you got to be disciplined.
Well, I think buy term save the difference works but in relation to what?
Mm-hmm.
If I just buy term and save the difference, meaning I saved the difference of what I didn't put into term insurance. And you get there, sure, you did the thing that you said you wanted to do, but then what happens when you retire? Like that's kind of where the breaking part happens. And so for me, when it comes to a standpoint of um, this is something that I'm learning, especially in the marketing world, is when you look at his connotation towards whole life insurance and he says it's expensive or they only sell it for a high commission. Well, he is talking to a broke community. And when I mean broke, like these people aren't making any money. They're drowning in debt. And so, yeah, probably buying a whole life insurance policy isn't the best thing for them because they're not even disciplined to do it enough.
Mhm.
They might just need the term insurance. So, what I think from a standpoint of just the overall messaging, I think he has to do that so that, you know, his audience, his ideal client that he's talking to doesn't get sidetracked and he has to be so pointed to what they need to do. But at the same standpoint, like we know that it's wrong because if you look at any advanced planning within the life insurance world, estate planning world, or just, wealth planning world in general, if you do the right things, you get the returns that you wanted and you're making the incomes that you wanted, you're if you don't want to pay that much in taxes, if you want the maximum amount of income during retirement, you want to make sure that your money doesn't run out. Well, you're going to be told that you need life insurance and it's going to need to be permanent insurance. So I think his messaging is correct for his ideal audience. Is it correct in the sense of its actual economics? Not necessarily, no.
And I'm glad you pointed that out because I don't think whole life insurance is for everybody. It is expensive, and I think would you say the average American, because the average American is saving what 3 to 4% of what they make.
3 to 4%. Yes.
Yeah. So in comparison to the cost of whole life, I don't think it's probably for the average American. So maybe that's where the buying term and investing the difference. But again, you're saying investing in what? And I think it's the biggest thing is being disciplined. And you made a really good point. Who's Dave's audience? I don't think Dave's not getting the audience, the listeners that are probably high six-figure earners
Correct.
and business owners, right? He's getting the guys
Correct.
that are loaded up in debt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And something that you noted there, I think we need to be careful with our words because, we all these words get thrown around of, oh, well, whole life insurance is expensive. Well, it costs too much. And I think, in the world of insurance, there's an inverse relationship to where term insurance has the lowest price, but the highest cost. Whereas with whole life insurance, it's got the highest price, but the lowest cost
Correct.
because eventually you'll get back everything that you put into it and then some. And you also have to look at the fact that there's the price, there's the cost, and then there's the value that it creates. And if we just looked at everything along the lines of price, there wouldn't be much to go around in this world. Would Capitalism wouldn't survive.
You couldn't be more right. And that kind of leads into actually, I mean, I'm thinking, are you reading my notes here? Because
Nope.
it goes in
We're tracking.
how do you compare fees inside a whole life policy with like fees of a 401k or a mutual fund compounded for 40 years?
I usually don't, but I would, if somebody were to bring that discussion up, because it has been brought up before, what I would talk about is, if you broke it down and you just looked at the costs and the fees of what was going on, because typically what they say is, oh, well, this is what you're getting paid, and this is why this conversation gets brought up. I would take the commission schedule of a life insurance policy, and I'd take the fee schedule of an investment portfolio. Putting the same amount of dollars in, you could show in real time, hey, if you put $10,000 into a life insurance policy, the highest paid commission product there, year one, this is what you're going to get paid. Years 2 through 10, this is what you're going to get paid. Years 11 through whenever you pass away, this is what you're going to get paid. But if we took that same time frame and put the $10,000 into a brokerage account, and the fee was, say, a 1%, even though that the average fee is like somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5, here's what the advisor would make on that. Okay, now from these two standpoints, here's the value that's created from the life insurance. Here's how much is created in the investment portfolio, but here's what it cost you to have this in the investment portfolio compared to here's what it cost you to have in the life insurance. Not necessarily looking at it from a dollar to dollar from dollar standpoint of what's in the account value, but if this is a conversation around fee versus commission, well then who's being paid more? What's costing you more?
Correct.
The math to me says the investment portfolio costs more.
Well, Jack Vogel said he's the founder of Vanguard, and he said if you take a look at the average mutual fund, even with a 2% MER, compounded over 40 years, will erode 2/3 of your wealth.
Correct.
If you think about that, he said you put up 100% of the capital, you take 100% of the risk, and you get 1/3 of what's left, all on a 2% fee.
Yeah, seems like a great deal. People are making it out great right now.
So, we talk about this in our business, the safe withdrawal rate. If you have an investment portfolio, what is that safe number that they say that you should withdraw from the portfolio so that the chances of you outliving your money doesn't happen? And I think in the investment world, we've all agreed, and economists and everyone stress tested this, and they came up with 4%. They said 4% is the safe withdrawal rate in retirement so that it remains low, the certainty of you outliving your money. Dave says you can withdraw 8% because the markets historically have returned 10%. What would you say to this? Like, what do you think is wrong with this advice?
I think that there needs to be a conversation around knowing what average versus actual rate of returns are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you got 10% every single year within the market, sure. After taxes, after fee, no volatility, you're getting 10% every single year. Absolutely. But if you look at the statistics of your probability of being able to get 10% every single year for the next 30, 40, 50 years, it's like slim to none. You're probably going to get around 8%.
And then you got a sequence of returns.
Yeah. And so when you have this investment portfolio and you show up to retirement, that 4% rule was found out around the fact of, if you ran this simulation, you would have a 98% chance that you would have at least $1 in your bank account when you died over the course of 20 some years. I know life isn't linear, and I know the market doesn't stay flat or just go up. There's some actual volatility that we're feeling right now. And, I don't trust Dave Ramsey when he says that, nor do I know that he is correct. I know he's wrong in that. And, I hope people don't completely take that advice.
It could get him into a lot of trouble. I mean, possibly even getting sued if someone actually took that as investment advice. What I love about whole life insurance is that it's okay to have an investment portfolio. It's, Caleb Williams wrote the book, The And Asset. It's having whole life insurance and other assets. What I love about whole life insurance is that can be your backstop in down markets. So if you were relying on this 4 or 5% in retirement and you do face a correction like we are right now, you can put a pause on taking money out of the market and start to access the cash value by borrowing against it and using that as your income until the markets come back again. I mean, I think every financial plan should have a component of insurance, and preferably whole life insurance if you can, in it. Bob Castellone made a really great speech, and he said, it's like a movie. You've got the main character and you have all the supporting actors, supporting characters around it. And whole life insurance should be the main character in any
Yeah,
financial plan.
absolutely.
What do you think is the greatest issue right now holding young people back by saving for retirement?
I think the biggest issue is their cash flow structure
Yeah.
and how they operate their finances. So what we have found, and you mentioned this earlier, was the fact that in America, the average savings rate is 4%, and it hovers around 4%. It doesn't really change. It changed in COVID, it spiked up, but then it came right back down. And the problem is that that 4% pretty much hovers at 4%. So what that means is as people join the workforce and their incomes rise, their savings rate still stays the same, meaning their expenses are rising with their income. And so where most people struggle is the fact of dealing with lifestyle creep. So as long as someone's income is deposited in the same account that their expenses come out of, they'll always be running in parallel with each other because they are unconsciously spending while trying to manually save money. What I mean by manually saving money is if you are trying to save money in your world, unless it's a 401k, you literally have to log into your bank account, move money from a checking account to another account. And oftentimes that is dealt with after the fact of your subscriptions coming out, your mortgages coming out, your rent, your groceries, your everything is taken out. And so all you're doing is creating this perpetual system, which I call the financial treadmill of going back from checking to savings, savings to checking, checking to savings, because life will happen and you got to move the money from your savings account back in your checking because you spent it unconsciously because your brain is fighting against yourself to where unconsciously you're spending the money and you're justifying it because your paycheck will come in 2 weeks. Where subconsciously, you're constantly asking yourself, how do I save more money so that I can have it for retirement? But your prefrontal cortex and the dopamine hit of being able to have the dopamine hit of today and actually getting something today is greater than what will happen later, which is retirement. So I think the greatest problem with younger people today is their cash flow structure and it not being set up properly.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the shiny object syndrome.
Mhm.
Yeah, like, you're absolutely right. They want something today, and they get caught in this consumerism trap. I wasn't. I didn't even have this in my questions, but I noticed you're wearing a Currents shirt. Unfortunately, we don't have this in Canada, and I did talk to Dave Mazika about this. I go, buddy, if I want you to come up to Canada and bring this up here. Like, I think this is a fantastic product, and I think this leads really well into the next question of what you just said about saving, and not being able to be disciplined. They like this shiny object syndrome. I got to have it today. Why don't you explain for the listeners in the United States about Currents and what this has done for your practice and what this has done for your clients? Because this is a fantastic product. It's a structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for letting me share on it. So, first, I will address the fact that, we've talked about the average American saving rate is 4%, and that savings rate of 4% is including of retirement plans that are being saved into. Okay. The average client that we have on Currents, their savings rate is 28%.
That's insane.
And the reason is because of what I just talked about, which is the unconscious consumption and manually saving, to where we flip that flow to where they are unconsciously saving and manually spending. And so if you think about, when you were a kid and your parents handed you $5, $10, $20, at the end of the day, you somehow, some way figured out not to come back with any money because your job was to spend it, right? It didn't matter what you spend it on or if you gave it away. Like you just knew don't come home with money,
Yeah.
right? Now, the people who did come home with money, they're probably pretty good savers nowadays, right? But most of us did not. And the reason is because our brain associates the fact that once we're given this and this dollar is meant to be spent somewhere. So we notice that Americans don't have a savings problem, they have a cash flow structure problem. And if we can automate this system, then everything starts to get better. So for me in my practice, we use Currents technology. And what we do here is we set up what we call an income reservoir where we have our direct deposits, our paychecks, our rental income from our assets and everything flow into our reservoir. And then from our reservoir, we manually automate how much money is going to leave this reservoir to go to our checking account for everyday spending throughout time. So when I look at my cash flow framework, I've got three parts to this cash flow framework. Number one is, how do we make our income and expenses asynchronous of each other? Well, we do that through implementing our reservoir. Income comes into one account, expenses come out of another. We move money from our reservoir into our expense account. The second part is, how do we automate this? Okay, because if we have our direct deposit automated into our reservoir, and then we automate the amount of money leaving our reservoir each month the same time, right? Same amount. If we have more money coming in than we do going out, it automates our savings. Our savings has now become unconscious. It just happens as a matter of fact because we have more coming in than it's going out, and it's all automated. The third piece is, how do we have something that gives us timely data? For me, this is currents. I've found tremendous success in it for my own life, for my client's life, because once you have this currents technology in your world, and you set what we call your target, that's basically your emergency fund, which we recommend 3 to 6 months of your expenses. You'll know right away whether you're below that amount or you have a surplus of that amount. Well, if you have a surplus, there's no more reason to continue to save here unless we have a goal coming up. Otherwise, we need to go create what we call a cash flow engine. This cash flow engine is going to put more money into this reservoir, and our expenses stay the same, so we reach financial freedom a whole lot faster than we would if we were just trying to guess how much is left over at the end of the month. Does that help explain it?
Absolutely. And as you're talking, all I keep thinking about is I live by the moniker living 50, 30, 20. And the 20% is when you pay yourself first. So when I'm hearing what you're saying is this is automated. So you're automatically paying yourself first, whatever percentage you set up, right? And then you've got the 50%, your fixed expenses, and you've got your debt and lifestyle expenses, which you're saying saying, how much do I need? What are my fixed expenses? What's going to be my debt repayment, my minimum debt repayments? And I'm going to automatically move that. So it's like you said, it's done subconsciously. And my savings, I'm going to move a portion of that. It's done automatic, which is, again, subconsciously. So you're paying yourself first. I love it. I think it's a fantastic product. And I've been hearing you do a lot with it, and I've had a couple calls with Dave. I'm like, buddy, you got to come up here and bring this up here. He goes, we haven't even scratched the surface yet in the United States with this. And I love the name because if anybody understands money, it's currency, and currents is a flow, right? If you think of currents in electricity, it's a current, right? It flows. So it's cash flow. It's money flowing. I love what he's done, and I love what you're doing with it. And I think your clients really appreciate what you're doing too. I see the book behind you, The Lifestyle Investor. I read The Lifestyle Investor by Justin Donald, and I know you did some mentoring with him. What are some of the things that you learned from Justin that maybe your father didn't teach you?
That's a great question. So Justin, great friend of mine, personal mentor of mine, was talking to him yesterday. So we're still in a relationship, and I'm part of his mastermind group, the Lifestyle Investor. Happy to talk to anybody about that. And some of the things that I have learned from Justin, number one is always bet on the jockey and not the racehorse. And I think that is one of the best pieces of advice when it comes to investing that I've gotten. And what we mean by that is, oftentimes when you look at investments, you will always think, oh, well, it does this rate of return. It does, it's going to pay me this much cash flow. Well, at the end of the day, it's only going to do that if people are involved. And that jockey is the one who's running that deal. So if you're looking at a syndication of real estate, you need to be looking at the sponsor, the jockey, just as much as you are looking at the racehorse, the actual deal. Because if you have a bad jockey, but a good racehorse, at the end of the day, it's still probably not going to work out and it's going to crumble. So I think that's one of the best pieces of advice that I got from him. And then also building out your investment criteria. We had a call earlier this week. We invited a bunch of people to it, but building out your investment criteria. And this criteria are the rules and regulations that you put in place so that when you have a deal that comes your way or an investment that comes your way, you can go back to this investment criteria, see if it checks the boxes and is aligned with your values to know whether you should do this investment or not. And you want to do this not while you're making a deal. You want to do this while you're not doing any deals. Because when you're usually taking down a deal, you're investing in something, there's emotions involved. Well, you need to build your investment criteria when there's not a deal going on, you're not investing something, you're sitting down, analyzing the deals that you've done. Hey, this is what I do like, this is what I don't like, this is what I want, these are the rules in which I invest moving forward. And so for me, personally, and almost all of my clients, we will build out our investment criteria so that as things progress, as we have more wealth, as we have deals come along, we can always refer back to that and the lessons learned and the rules of which we invest so that each time we invest, it just becomes easier and easier. And we have mitigated our risks so we have less losses over time.
That's great. You also mentioned Garrett Gunderson. He's author of the New York Times bestselling book Killing Sacred Cows. He's authored I think 7 books, and most recently the one right behind you, What Would the Rockefellers Do? Garrett was also mentored by your dad. Garrett's got a bit of a different way of teaching and mentoring. I was at his home a couple of years ago in Utah, where he did a 2-day mastermind, and he's set himself apart from a lot of other advisors. So my question is, what has Garrett taught you? I know him being mentored by your father, but is there anything different that maybe Garrett has taught you that maybe you use in your financial business today?
Yes. Garrett's an awesome guy. He's like an older brother to me. Just love him to death. I'm actually going to hang out with him next week. We talk on a weekly basis and couldn't be more appreciative of the mentorship that he's given me. And there are so many things, like I have an entire file on my computer of all the things that he's taught me along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But, one of the best things that he taught me was the fact that your income is a byproduct of the value you create. You want more income? Go create more value. And where you should invest is always in yourself first. And if you invest in yourself first, that will end up telling you where the rest of your money needs to go, because then you'll have more knowledge, more expertise, experience, and then purpose and passion along the way. And as you do that, you want to collaborate with people. You want to have good collaborators in your world. You want to eliminate escapism in your world to where you're escaping what you actually need to address. You need to delegate roles and not tasks. And then, as you go along, this is going to help you be so much more of a producer rather than a consumer.
That's so good. If you want to create more income, create more value. That's a good piece. That's a good nugget right there. We're in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in North American history, with trillions of dollars moving from baby boomers to younger generations. What unique planning challenges does this create, especially as a young professional like yourself?
Really good question. Number one is estate planning and ensuring the fact that your assets of G1, generation 1, are passed to G2 in the way that you want them to. So, like, for example, what would the Rockefellers do? If you go to book.stonecenturyfinancial.com, you can get a free copy of What Would the Rockefellers Do? And we talk in there about the Rockefeller Method and how you want to transfer your wealth from one generation to the next. And it's something that I got from one of my attorneys that I work with a lot. Is estate planning per generations is a lot like building the Golden Gate Bridge. What most people do is they just want to build from generation 1 and then hopefully it gets to G2. Well, what we should be doing is starting from both sides and then building to the middle so that they can join together perfectly and seamlessly. And we know the rules of the game that we're playing. And we know how our values are passed on, our mission is passed on, so that when the wealth is transferred, it's not just lost. And, in studies all over the place, you'll see that by the second generation, 70% of the money goes hot. It's almost lost. And by the third generation, it's completely gone. And in the Rockefeller book, we talk about the fact that, you look at the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. Well, the Vanderbilts had more money than the Treasury at one point,
Mm-hmm.
and they're completely gone. That all of their wealth is gone. Yet you look at the Rockefellers and they're 7 generations later. But it's not just the Rockefellers. You look at their executives that were part of their team, they're also on their seventh generation. And why is because they put the systems and structures in place to allow that to happen. And they're not just passing on their wealth, but they're passing on their heritage to the next generation. And so as I look at that, I think one of the best things possible is get your estate planning done correctly and do it in a way that it's going to continue on for generations to come. And I love doing this. I'm working on a case right now with a dad who's got 3 sons. They're in the old world, and it is going to be a massive case. And I am excited to see what the generational impact will be because they've started it in one way, and now we're enhancing it to be even better along the way with all the rules and the family constitution, which will be the preamble to the trust of theirs to really create just another stepping stone for the next generation of G3.
I read a chapter about this in my book, Wealth Without Wall Street. It's called Be Like a Rockefeller, Not a Vanderbilt, and it's for the exact same reasons what you just said. The Vanderbilts had more money than Treasury. It didn't even get past I think it got to maybe possibly 4 generations and it was done. Where John D. Rockefeller Jr. he set up a family trust, but what he did, and you're very well aware of this, he purchased a life insurance policy on every beneficiary in the trust, and this is what I think they call this the waterfall method. And it's the Rockefeller method is having, like you said, having a trust set up and purchasing a life insurance policy on every beneficiary of that trust, so that every time someone in the trust dies, the trust gets replenished, and this carries on the generational wealth. So when you're doing your estate planning, are you setting these up as like the waterfall method using trust and life insurance?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of the greatest assets that can keep generational wealth flowing. Millennials and GZ, they often have different financial values and priorities than their parents. How does this impact your approach when working with multiple generations?
They may have different values, but the end goal is almost always the same.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, number one is how do you not create trust fund babies? We have this conversation all the time. And whose responsibility is it so that the kids don't become trust fund babies? Well, it's the parents. You don't want trust fund babies, then take the responsibility of teaching your kids about money. If you don't know how to teach about money, well, then go learn about money and then bring people into the picture that can help with it. At the end of the day, it's much more, if you really boiled it down to the families and the generations, they all want to have longevity in their family's history. They want financial independence and financial freedom. And if they have some sort of wealth and they're not controlled by their money, they almost always want to give money away. Well, if those are the 3 main objectives for families, all we really need to do is change the wording around how they do it if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Some just may, if you looked at the parents, they may just want to buy bonds and stocks and annuities. Whereas the next generation, maybe they want nothing to do with stocks and they want everything to do with real estate and crypto and whatever it may be. Well, all you're doing is going from one asset to the next. The most important piece is how do you create the language in the family constitution, which we talk a lot about, so that the values and the mission is passed on. And then the assets that, something that we talk a lot about, this made me think, is most people sell products and then try to back it up with a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, you need to set your strategy in place and then just backfill it with products. The same is true as generation to generation. If you have a strategy, the products can change, but the strategy still ought to be the same.
There's a lot of wealth in Tennessee and Nashville, and not just Tennessee, but I've driven around and I've seen some incredible homes in Brentwood, and there's wealth everywhere.
Have you seen Dave's house?
No.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. I guess he paid cash for that, right?
No idea.
He's like, pay cash for your house, don't borrow. Okay.
Yep.
Um, do you think, because you're dealing with families that have wealth and they also have their kids, different generation, different mindset. Are you finding that a lot of the families, the wealthier families, they know how to earn the money. They just never spent time teaching their kids about money, and they're gifting it just to the kids, or they're squandering it, or are they actually taking time to learn about, they know how to make it, but really how to keep it?
That's a great question. I would say a lot of them, majority of clients, especially entrepreneurs, are extremely good at creating the income, but they just think, oh, well, I'm a business owner. I'm a really good investor too. But the reality is, those are two completely different skill sets.
Mhm.
And so I think overall, most families are really good at making income, but most are not very good at becoming a better investor. And so, in my world, when I talk about the order in which I invest, I've got four layers. Number one is quality of life. How do you invest in your health, in your overall quality of life, whether that's your doctors, your gym memberships, your trainers, your nutrition, whatever that may be, so that you have the energy to show up and be the person that you need to be. The second is, how do you increase your skill set? What and where could you invest in yourself to grow your skill set to create more income? The third place that you invest is, how do you become a better cash flow investor? Well, if you looked at mainstream media, they would say that if you want a better return in your investments, you need to go take a higher risk. But if you go look at anybody else that's actually worth their weight in the world of wealth, they'll tell you like almost to the T opposite.
Mhm.
You want to mitigate your risk as much as possible while getting
Mhm.
the highest rate of return. The Ray Dalio, that's his, like, he owns one of the largest money managers in the world. That's his literal main goal, is how do I mitigate as much risk as possible while maximizing my return? So how do you do that? Well, you invest in yourself. You grow your knowledge, expertise, experience, purpose, and passion. And then once you have those and you actually know what's going on, then you start investing in assets along the way.
You said something back there about, people think that they need to take more risk to increase cash flow. Um, One thing that I learned from Garrett, I would call it a Garrettism, is, the way he relates to that is, so what you're saying is, in order to increase my chances of winning, I have to increase my chances of losing. And anytime I position that in front of a client, they're like, no, I don't like that strategy. No, I don't want to increase my chances of loss.
No.
No. You're really active on LinkedIn and sharing financial insights and strategies, and your content really focuses on making complex financial strategies simple. What's your process for translating technical concepts into content that resonates with your audience?
I wish I told you I had a really cool and sick formula for it, but that's just the way in which my brain works. These strategies come very simple to me. Not to say that I'm just totally gifted and I just get it from a sixth sense, but like, I spend hours and hours a week, a month, days that I study these things so I know how they work. I'm not just regurgitating value.
Mhm.
Um, for me, it's just boiling it down into layman's terms. And if you've ever been in a meeting with me, one of the first things I say is, if I can't explain something in squares and squiggles, then probably a good idea that I don't do that thing.
Mhm. In your perspective, how has social media transformed how financial professionals connect with and educate potential clients compared to the traditional methods?
I think with the traditional methods, a lot of the times you had to seek out a financial advisor and get the information.
Mhm.
But nowadays it's so much is posted on the internet. And I just recently did a national training call for a financial planning group. And what I've talked about over the years is the fact that it's not, the saying used to be, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mhm.
But I now talk all over the country about this, which is, it's not about what you know. It's also not about who you know. It's about who knows you. And I think advisors are seeing that. And the more that your name is out there and the more that you have your own brand, then people recognize who you are and your name is in the mouths and the heads of those clients. And that's where you begin to really start picking up traction.
Yeah, you've built a really strong personal brand in the financial space. So, what advice would you give to other professionals looking to effectively leverage platforms like LinkedIn for client education and acquisition?
I would say don't be afraid to start posting.
Yeah.
I was speaking at an event in Philadelphia a couple years ago, and I had spoken to a couple hundred people, and somebody asked the question, "Well, Brock, I don't know what to say, or I'm worried about what I'm going to say on there." And I said, "Well, how many followers do you have on whatever?" And he said, "Well, I've got like 150." And I said, "Well, nobody cares then. You don't have enough. Just go ahead and post. They won't even notice." And everybody started laughing, and it's true. It's like when you're just getting started, just post, just get the reps in so you know what's going on, and eventually you'll find your style, you'll find your voice, and you'll continue to grow it. And one day, someday, maybe you have a large audience and you're putting stuff out there, and at that point you're probably just saying stuff and your team's making it for you. And if you screw up and you say something wrong, they'll forget it in a week.
But also too, the algorithm also picks up too that if if you're posting once a week or once every couple of weeks, the algorithm is not going to do anything for you. But if you're posting every single day, the same time every single day, like Instagram, the algorithm will pick up that you are more of a content creator, and it will push it out there more, and you'll get more eyeballs seeing it. Yeah. One thing I noticed is that you don't have my book up there on your
I don't
site.
have your book up there. I haven't gotten a copy yet.
But
You are on my list this year.
Okay. I am. I'm gonna get you a copy. I'm gonna come down to Nashville. I know your dad's got a copy. I'm gonna definitely get you a copy of my book so you can get it up there. What's the latest? I know you're a big book reader. Clearly by the books you've got there. I love Tom Wall's Permission to Spend. I recently read that fantastic book. I also recently just finished reading David McKnight's The Power of Zero. Fantastic book. What books have you read recently that you would recommend anyone that they should really pick up and read?
Four of my favorite are What Would the Rockefellers Do?
Yeah.
The Lifestyle Investor, Permission to Spend, and The Inner Matrix. Some others that, I might share if you're just getting started would be The Slight Edge, or As a Man Thinketh. Those are some of my favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my other favorite books is Killing Sacred Cows 2.0. You brought it up earlier.
Yep.
One of my favorite books of all time. And I like that one probably the best because I'm in that one. So that's that I always like recommending that one.
Now you just got to get your dad to write a book.
That's right. Don't we all?
He has got so much information, and he needs to get it out there. Tell him to put it in his calendar.
Yep, agreed.
Where can people find you? Because you've got a podcast called Cash Flow Legends. I highly recommend listening to it. I listen to it on Spotify. I listen to it and I train. I pick up nuggets from you, Nate and Dean. But on your LinkedIn, and you got Instagram, and you mentioned your website. If people want to go to your website, they can get a free copy of What Would the Rockefellers Do. So why don't you give my listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Brock Fortner, pretty easy.
Yep.
And then if they go to stonecenturyfinancial.com, that's my website. And if you do want a free copy of What Would the Rockefellers Do, you can go to book.stonecenturyfinancial.com. Anybody can reach out, find me, and I'm always happy to discuss.
And if people want to reach out and they want to learn more about currents and how they can get involved, what's your website that they can reach out to you?
They can go to livecurrents.com / Brock Fortner.
Yeah.
They can do that. And you mentioned I've got Cash Flow Legends with the Z podcast, and then I've also have another podcast. It's quiet, but I have it. I don't promote it. It's called Board of Titans, and so there's all of those places you can get with me.
Amazing, Brock. Thank you so much for your time. It was great having you on the show. Keep doing what you're doing. I love what you're doing out there and helping people, and I'm learning too from you. with your nuggets, and it's great having you on the show. Guys, don't forget to pick up my book, Wealth Without Wall Street. It is on Amazon. It's in Indigo. It's in chapters. I go through a lot of the stuff that Brock just talked about. If you like this show, please hit the subscribe button and click the link below to like it, share it, get the algorithm going. That's all for today. Take care of your wealth and your health.